I'm ready. I just need the mic turned
Oh,
on.
yeah, it's already, it's ready.
It's
Yeah.
okay. We have some time. Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Loretta Heber-Girardet. I am the chief of UNDRR's Risk Knowledge Branch, covering sections in Geneva, Bonn, I might add, as well as in Korea. And it's a real pleasure to be here today, because this is really the next step in our journey to really try to bring more of an urban focus to the climate agenda. And I'm very excited by the panel that we have today. This side event, Strengthening Urban Resilience for a Changing Climate, is organized by the Making Cities Resilient 2030 Global Partnership. And it's being hosted by two of MCR 2030's core partners, ICLEI and UN Habitat, at this multi-level action and urbanization pavilion. In early October, so just a few months ago, the Dubai Police Resilience Center hosted the Global Urban Resilience Forum under the theme, Strengthening Resilience for a Changing Climate. This was the first attempt that we had at really bringing together some urban actors representing municipalities, mayors, and others to look at the question of how do we really strengthen the focus of cities in the COP processes. And what it resulted in was what we believe is a powerful set of recommendations to reduce urban climate risk under the title, The Dubai Call to Action. And to begin today's session, we're going to actually have two video recordings. And the first is from the Dubai Police Resilience Center itself, a representative who will be making the opening remarks. And the name of today's speaker is Brigadier Ahmed Burkaiba, who's the head of Dubai City Police Resilience Center. And he will be introducing the Dubai Call to Action. Oh, okay. We will not be having that, but we'll move straight on to the Secretary General's Special Representative for Disaster Risk Reduction, Ms. Mami Mitsutori, who will be providing us with some opening comments on the screen behind us. So I hope you can see.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to make the opening remarks at this side event focused on strengthening urban resilience for a changing climate. I would like to thank ICLEI and UN Habitat, both core partners of the Making Cities Resilient 2030 MCR 2030 Global Partnership, for hosting this important dialogue at their joint pavilion at COP28. 2 months ago, under the leadership of the Dubai City Resilience Hub, the MCR 2030 network came together at the Global Urban Resilience Forum to agree on the powerful Dubai Call for Action, Scaling Up Urban Resilience for a Changing Climate. The Call for Action is a robust set of recommendations that underscores the recognition that cities, with their growing populations and critical infrastructure needs, are on the front lines of the challenges and opportunities to address the climate crisis. The Call for Action highlights the need for comprehensive local strategies coupled with a strong commitment to develop and maintain urban areas that are adaptive, sustainable, and inclusive. For its part, UNDRR will continue to call on member states at COP28 to scale up efforts towards zero climate disasters, because everyone should have a future where they are not threatened by disasters. We need to rapidly reduce emissions while at the same time dramatically accelerate action on climate change adaptation and disaster resilience. We have the tools at our disposal, but need greater political will and financing to meet the scale of the emergency. MCR 2030 has now mobilized 31 national governments as well as more than 1,630 municipalities from 84 countries and territories, covering a combined population of 528 million people. This global partnership is a tremendous resource for local governments all around the world. I would like to extend my appreciation to the United Arab Emirates and the government of Dubai for your leadership in tackling climate change and for hosting COP28. Your dedication to shaping a sustainable future is commendable and sets an example for the entire global community. I also want to express my deep gratitude to the Dubai Police and its Resilience Center for your lead role within our MCR 2030 network. Your commitment underscores the importance of collaborative efforts in promoting climate resilience and for hosting.
I think Mami was probably reaching the end of her statements. Essentially, and she would have very much liked to have been here today, but our SRSG had to return to Geneva.
cities have committed to one or more clear adaptation goals, with 1/5 addressing biodiversity loss. 74% of cities Race to Resilience signatories reported to the CDP ICLEI track in 2023, and 100% of cities Race to Resilience have made their reports publicly available. So why is this relevant? So the relevance to UNDRR, the Making Cities Resilient 2030 program of work, it might be obvious, as well as the Dubai Call to Action. The Dubai Call to Action clearly recognizes the critical importance of territorial and urban resilience as key elements of scaling up ambition and action on both climate adaptation and mitigation. And at COP28, we have a major, perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity The Race to Resilience is complementary because it puts a measurable target to this. The overarching goal of the Race to Resilience is to make 4 billion people more resilient to climate impacts by 2030. So on the one hand, we have partners like MCR 2030, which offers support to cities to understand their risks and move towards improved urban resilience and results for DRR. It provides a clear roadmap for building urban resilience, providing tools, access to knowledge, and monitoring and reporting, and provides cities with a scorecard assessment on their DRR activities and capacities, linked to each city's implementation of the Sendai framework. On the other hand, Cities Race to Resilience provides a meaningful springboard to ensure that the work that is happening on the ground is recognized, rewarded, and showcased at the highest of levels. Crucially, both MCR 2030 and Cities Race to Resilience aims to ensure that local and regional voices are put front and center, ultimately advocating that climate finance flows to the local level in support of improving the adaptive capacity and resilience of the most marginalized and vulnerable communities. Here, I want to emphasize that being a part of the Cities Race to Resilience initiative is directly aligned to partner programs such as MCR 2030 and places no additional reporting burden on any cities that are already reporting on their locally led progress. So concretely, the Cities Race to Resilience initiative also acts as a global platform on which cities can showcase their ambitious climate adaptation actions that improve the resilience of their population. And then this also helps to create a loop or a closed cycle for emphasizing adaptation and giving equal importance to the role of adaptation as that of mitigation and the race to decrease emissions. Through Cities Race to Resilience, cities and subnational governments are also able to demonstrate non-party stakeholder leadership through the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda and have potential for greater inclusion within the formal UNFCCC processes as per the original Marrakesh Partnership Framework, which clearly identified cities, states, and regions as policymakers sitting across all pathway areas, as well as through multi-level governance dialogue processes such as the Urbanization and Climate Change Ministerial Meeting, the second iteration of which is taking place tomorrow. So as partners on elevating the role of local and regional governments, I think we can all agree that all of this work, all of these initiatives, all these programs aim for the same thing: to elevate the importance of subnational governments across sectors, across programs of work, relevant agendas and pathways, and in line with the Dubai Call to Action. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I've heard on multiple sessions so far that the ambition of keeping 1.5 alive is very much dependent on the ability of cities to build resilience to climate impacts. And it's really gratifying to hear how the Race to Resilience, along with MCR 2030, It's a partnership. You need multiple initiatives working together to really achieve this ambition. So thank you very much for your presentation. It's now my pleasure to turn to the Mayor of Bonn, Ms. Katja Dörner. The Dubai Call to Action emphasizes the importance of an all-of-society approach to climate risk reduction. And this is a particular area of strength in your own city of Bonn. Can you please expand on how you so effectively engage with local communities and partners?
Yes, thank you very much for having me and that we have the opportunity to discuss this very important topic. Bonn is home to 25 United Nations organizations, including UNFCCC and UNDRR. So both perspectives are represented like this. And the city of Bonn is a part and parcel of a very dense cluster of sustainability actors, including UN and international organizations. And as you already mentioned, Bonn became a resilience hub of the Making Cities Resilient 2030 initiative of UNDRR in June. But however, our history of engagement in disaster risk reduction and early warning is much longer, both locally in our city and on an international scale with our partner cities all around the world. The city of Bonn is located right next to the Rhine, one of the largest rivers in Europe, and therefore we have some relevant experiences in flood management. We are able to cope with that on a technical scale, and also the funding, for example, is clear. But given the impacts of climate change, our work for more resilience has significantly changed, and it expanded over the past decades. So Bonn is facing an increasing amount of heavy rains, leading to stream floods and rising temperatures in the summer, like in many other cities in the world. Our approach is partnership. Firstly, as worded in the Dubai Call for Action, we cooperate with scientific, technological, and academic institutions to improve the quality of and access to applicable risk information and data. So already in 2010, we started working with universities, especially with our home university in Bonn, political decision makers and other stakeholders to draft climate scenarios for Bonn and set up adaptation strategies. In the past 10 years, we were part of two major research projects on heat, one called SURES and one called Mutabor. And while SURES showed us our risks and vulnerabilities and helped develop a replicable map tool for cities, Mutabor develops scenarios of possible adaptation. And now at the moment, we are working on our next integrated climate adaptation concept, translating our findings into action and redesigning our city area. And one of the challenges, and I think it is very important to talk about the challenges as well. One of the main challenges is to balance the different interests for using the same space. So should it be used for a tree or for a parking lot? Should it provide space for bicycles or pedestrians? Such a transition will not work without people owning it. I think
and in that provides the context perhaps also for us as to why we are doing the things we are doing. I think, first of all, we are still immensely failing to place risk reduction at the heart, really, of all our choices, whether these be societal, political, or economical ones. And it is a bit what the mayor also said. It is very difficult to, when we make decisions in terms of our city planning, the interests are varying, but one has then to look into risk and resilience in the city, but it is still far away, I would say, from putting these choices at the heart of our discussions. So that's perhaps one of the reasons why it is so important to have these kind of conversations and to bring the dialogues together. Besides then, of course, the next problem that we have, namely to really be able to assess disaster data and applicable risk knowledge, definitely at the local level. It is not easy for cities to understand, both in the north, in the global north, as in the global south, to understand and to know what the risks are they are confronted with. Data is not yet fully detailed and accessible, definitely in developing countries and certainly in least developing countries. And then the third problem I think that we have really is and that climate-related extreme weather events in all of our places, is that the cost of those disasters are not matched and perhaps cannot even be matched with the financing that is needed to reduce the risks, to tackle the risks, and to build resilience in a substantial way. So the disaster risks continue to be externalized actually in our global financial system, and that is absolutely to the detriment of us human beings and our ecosystems. But there is a bit of hope, and I think your organization, Loretta, and the Sendai framework has been of tremendous support and help to that. I was very pleased to hear this year at the UN when you had the revision and the report on the Sendai framework. Very pleased to hear that more countries and cities have now disaster preparedness strategies, and that 99 countries, it's half of the countries, but they do have local governments included in their disaster risk reduction strategies and implementation. So we are making some progress, but the point that I want to say is that we need to scale this all up. And that is where now we have then, from an ICLEI perspective, have come in currently into three particular areas. The first one is MCR 2030. Obviously, we were very, very pleased to partner up with UNDR. MCR 2030 was launched at the ICLEI's Daring Cities conference that would take place in Bonn in 2020. And for the next 10 years, we're envisaging that partnership to be long-term, inclusive, multi-stakeholder, as you also said, to support local governments in building resilience and in their jurisdictions. And we've, at ICLEI, we use MCR 2030 as the entry point for the 2,500 cities and towns and regions we work with, to use it as an entry point for them when they want, and where we guide them also to work on resilience and disaster risk planning. So in that sense also, I'm very pleased to co-share with
network. And this is a component that's part of the arsenal of loss and damage, but it's critically important because it's about catalyzing technical support to countries. And this also includes at the subnational level so that they are able to access the fund by putting in place the evidence, the data, which you mentioned, which is so critical, but having the capacity as well to put in place the measures needed to avert and minimize those critical prevention elements that are traditionally underfunded as part of the broader loss and damage issue. So very important that the subnational, that cities can access this, and we're going to be doing our part to support. So thank you very much, Gino. It's now my pleasure to turn to the chairman of the committee and general director of MCR 2030 Resilience Hub Venice, our latest Resilience Hub. We are so pleased to have you join the other cities. And I know that there's a lot of really fabulous work going on in Venice. Dr. Alessandro Costa, the question we'd like you to respond to is that the Dubai call to action highlights the need for greater effort to reduce, obviously, the negative impacts of climate change. Having been to Venice myself, I have seen, as I'm sure we all have firsthand, the challenges that your city is facing. Can you please outline how Venice's extensive flood defenses are working to protect the city and its world-famous cultural heritage? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It will be my pleasure. I don't know if you can hear me. It seems so. I have a few slides. First of all, I would like to convey you the apologies from the mayor of Venice that would have loved to be here, but unfortunately for within his agenda, it was virtually impossible to take him to Dubai these days. And so he sent me. I'm the Director General of Venice Sustainability Foundation, which is a foundation where the mayor is vice chair, and that is devoted to
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And maybe before going into some of the city level work that we do and that we support, I do want to go a little bit into the broader engagement on data. Here at COP, I think it's important to recognize the many different dimensions that are critical there. Of course, we've heard about the partnerships, we've heard about the many engagements. I think for all of us, the local climate action summit has been very important. The ministerial meeting on urbanization and climate change is important. And all of those try, of course, to bring cities to the table, to bring cities into the negotiations. We always highlight the importance of cities with maybe two key factors that 70% of greenhouse gas emissions are in one way or the other related, to cities. First, a big piece of data. And of course, we also come up with, for example, in the UN Habitat context, that 70% of cities are immediately impacted, or in the very near future, very severely impacted by climate change. 1 billion informal settlement dwellers are highly vulnerable to climate change. But I think we are still struggling in terms of really developing that narrative on strong data, if that is finance, if that is vulnerability, if that is action. So I think it's important to maybe look at some of the key dimensions of this COP, the global stocktake. To start with, that was mentioned already, and the critical importance of local stakeholder engagement, having the data that really feeds that narrative on the importance of city engagement. Without wanting to go too much deeper there, but of course now we're also going into the phase of the next assessment cycle of the IPCC, which will kick off with a special report on climate change in cities. Started the conversations on how to get coherent, consistent city data into that process. And another dimension is we have, as UN Habitat, developed with partners 200 indicators that analyze the urban dimension of NDCs. Again, to see how do we analyze where policy is going. Again, data needs at that global level. And then, of course, many of you are familiar with those big regional or global initiatives that try to help cities to get data a little bit more easily, if that is in Europe or European Union driven, Copernicus initiatives by the WMO in terms of downscaling data that makes this data available and accessible to cities. But for UN Habitat, we grapple with all of this. We're trying to look into this ultimately, and that goes then really back to the question. It is about how can cities deal with data within that global context. Of course, we all want to somehow be on the same page when it comes to the data that comes out of cities to feed into national narratives, into national reporting, and into global reporting, as I've mentioned. I'm, I think, very encouraged by all of the partnerships that we've highlighted. There is really strong alignment in terms of climate action, in terms of the integration of broader resilience into that conversation. But there's also an increasing understanding that we cannot have not just the climate and the resilience agendas run in parallel, but that we need to also integrate sustainable development much more consistently. Again, that complicates the data situation, but I think it is also an opportunity to for example, align from a UN Habitat perspective very strongly in partnership with DRR, the city's resilience profiling program, which has a very comprehensive data set and decision-making tools that address resilience, plus all of the different frameworks, some of which you've heard of in terms of climate change action planning at cities, but then also, for example, voluntary local reviews, the data sets that are behind this, and SDG localization more broadly. Maybe just nonetheless to be a little bit more concrete, it's at the city level where ultimately this integration needs to happen. Cities need to have the evidence base, the science to take decisions in terms of building resilience, in terms of taking climate action. There is a lot of very, very good examples of data that is really aggregated from the bottom, that is community driven, that looks, for example, even at informal settlements, and the frameworks are emerging to feed that into city level data, feed that into global, well, international data, SDG and climate data, and into global frameworks. And I think this is the way that we need to go, to tell a strong story that is at the city level, at the national level, or at the global level, and to tell a story that is somehow comparable and consistent to really bring the city level climate action, city level resilience into the global climate change frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we now have some time for discussion, questions from the audience. I think I'm going to, if you don't mind, kick off the question, beginning with our guest from the city of Bonn, the mayor. Could you tell me, I mean, just having worked on this issue for the past several years at UNDRR, the one thing I really noticed that makes a difference is leadership at the local level. And when you have a committed mayor who is really convinced of the need to invest in resilience, it really makes a huge difference. So I'd like to maybe hear a little bit more of your perspectives. What can we do to help generate more interest? And what are those ingredients of leadership that obviously you yourself have, because Bonn is doing such a great job on this issue, that maybe can be shared a bit more so that others can also pick up the topic and run with it as we so urgently need?
Well, I already mentioned that we have a very privileged situation in Bonn because we have the UN organizations, we have ICLEI in the city, and we have a very broad scientific situation with the university and a lot of NGOs, for example, and they all support us with data. Yeah. And I already mentioned the SURES data. They are very important when it comes to heat. And we know where, for example, where we can still build new flats and new houses, and we know where we cannot because we need, for example, the air, and we cannot make barriers to the air and we have to make sure that the air can come inside the inner city. And for example, at that point, we have a very good database due to SURES, for example. But I think it's also very important to involve your citizens. And when it comes to developing our climate agenda, our Bonn climate plan, we worked very close together with a civil society-driven initiative called Bonn for Future. And we managed that we had citizens that were selected at random, and we brought them together with experts and with key stakeholders, and they developed their own ideas, and we implemented these ideas into our administration climate plan. And I think that brought these ideas that we need to become climate neutral in 2035. And this is our goal in Bonn, to reach climate neutrality in 2035. We need all hands on deck, and therefore we need all the citizens get involved. And I think these are two sides of the medal. Science on the one hand, but also the citizens on the other. And I think this is very supportive for a mayor who has ambitious goals. Yeah, I would like to add one concrete thing that we are working on at the moment, because Nice was so concrete with the Moses project. What we are doing at the moment is developing a concept to become a sponge city. I already said that we are suffering of heavy rains, and these heavy rains are becoming more often, and they are a huge problem. And therefore, we want to become a sponge city. And what I don't know the concept yet, but what we will need to do, for example, we have a lot of small rivers, creeks, but also even small rivers that are in tubes underneath the surface in the city. And I think we will need to bring them back to the air. Yeah, and we have to renaturalize them, and therefore we also need space. And this will also become a very huge challenge, yeah, to discuss with our citizens that we need space for that kind of measures, because we need space where the water that comes down can go in the bottom, for example. Yeah, and as I already mentioned, related to the Rhine floods, we are used to that. We have technical equipment to deal with it, and we have the funding. But for that kind of measures that are now necessary and are even more necessary in the future, there is, for example, no financial structure with the other levels, even not with the federal level. And I think we have to address that kind of, challenges.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to follow up on that question, but first let me take anything from the audience. I think, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Rania Hamad from UNDRI Regional Office for the Arab States. My question is to Mr. Alessandro. We saw that the solution for the risk that Venice is facing is technology in the end of the day. Of course, there's a lot of research, and you need to also forecast the future and what is expected, and the future data as well as the current data and being shared. My question is how the private sector was engaged in the whole process, and would this be an example of a co-partnership between the public and private sector? Thank you.
Very nice. Very nice question, Rania. Thank you very much. Okay, let's say that this was basically public funding, but without the ability and the experience of very widespread set of skills from the private sector, would not ever been able to be achieved. To the extent that I didn't point that out, the very last image with let's say the credits of that video, we're quoting the Consorzio Venezia Nuova, which is a consortium, as you have it on the that gathers all the private entities that have collaborated together to create the infrastructure itself, but not just the infrastructure, I mean, not just the barrier, but also most of the complementary operations within the lagoon and in the open sea. Because we needed to balance this thing. We needed to, let's say, first of all, to mitigate the effect of high tides as much as possible, and then to adapt. So there's this sponge approach. Somehow it was without even knowing that we were talking about a sponge approach, was adopted by Venice when it came to try to smooth the amount of water that was in the lagoon itself. So by regenerating internal canals, not in the historical town, but let's say in the natural spaces, restoring those kind of transition environments that would be able to, let's say, retain more water and also being able to flush that water out when it was time for low tide. May I just add one thing? When you were saying that, you're saying that you need space. When you were saying that to achieve this sponge idea, you need space. I was reflecting that you may need at least three things. You probably be needing more than that. But one thing is space. Another thing is something that you need for most of the thing, which is consensus. So involvement of local community, but that's your business, I believe. And the third thing that you need is bridges. Bridges, yes, physical bridges. I mean, once you, and we know much about that in Venice. Once you have canals again, rivers again, creeks again, well, you need to cross them at a certain point. Thanks a lot.
May I just pick up on your point, because I was fascinated by your presentation on Venice, but I also am aware that probably many cities in the world cannot afford such technology. Correct me if I'm wrong. My question is, Venice is a world heritage. It belongs to the world to some degree, right? Of course, there's a huge investment that will go into saving the city. But can we think of ways in which resource-constrained cities around the world can benefit from some of the ideas, the technologies and innovation that are happening if they are not able to generate the type of investment that may be needed to preserve their cities? Just wondering if you have any thoughts on this, any of the panelists.
There's no rocket science, actually. I mean, it's the straightforward reply from my side would be yes. But if you ask me how, I would say that this is pretty much similar to many other issues that are, let's say, financial resource intense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you need to yeah. Well,
Gino,
Gino has more concrete.
Yeah.
Yes, I think just first example, Kingston, Jamaica, in the city, an area where which is actually a difficult social area. It's almost a slum area. The mayor tries to ensure that people are not there, but that does not necessarily work all the time. Now, then there is a river, which is most of the time dry. So not a lot of problems with that. But when it rains, it is very heavy. The river gets very quickly full. This river, whilst it is dry, is full with plastic bottles. Full.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which means when the river is full with water, that water cannot drain towards the seaside. So the water goes immediately into the dwelling area,
yeah.
so where people are living and already in difficult circumstances.
Mhm.
So the mayor has, it's $2 million, a program now where I think it's per year, but then on several times, where really he has people and enterprises to take away all of the plastic and to get it somewhere out. They don't have a recycling, which is unfortunate. That should be the next investment that they would need to have. But just to say, it is a fairly simple way of tackling it. It is still financially difficult, but I think also here, international organizations, other private banks, investors, we should look at those simple manners and measures to help cities and in situations like that. And you will find these kind of things, I think, in many places in the world. And just a last point, I mean, I went through it with the mayor and people, so it's around, I think there's around 3,000 people who live there. They all came out to congratulate the mayors for that. Now for 1 year already, they had no flooding anymore.
Right.
And that is what comes with the social consensus and all of it. But it is real. And of course, ultimately, of course, it is life saving and it's economic savings, it's social savings. So, but I think there are many of these small projects. And the problem, I think, is that, where to get the funding to do these kind of smaller
Right.
things that have, of course, transaction costs, but how to accelerate that perhaps. But yeah.
Very, very clear. Yes, please, go ahead.
Just to a few examples to add. I think there are increasingly numbers of climate action plans that require for every city to analyze every investment decision in terms of their climate impact, both from a mitigation and from an adaptation perspective. And very often it's just really rethinking planning that can make a difference. Often there is a price tag attached to it, but very often there's, of course, also saving opportunities if that is done correctly. Another opportunity, I think, where learning between cities can work very well, and we've talked about some of those issues, of course, is around nature-based solutions in terms of not sealing certain areas, in terms of not building in floodplains, in terms of, again, maybe too much planning, but to think not just within the boundaries of the city, but in terms of the ecosystem. So I think there are a lot of adaptation and mitigation solutions that where we can learn from one another in terms of the process, in terms of building the right kind of capacities, and at least for the low-hanging fruits, there is then a small price tag only attached. But those types of processes, of course, also ideally are designed in such a way that there's a longer term climate planning behind it, that builds adaptive capacity, that has adaptation pathways built in, and of course the same with a net zero approach. So yeah, those approaches I think can certainly be a good starting point.
Thank you. I see another hand up for a question, and
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing the insights. I have a question for you and Habitat, because you mentioned that you conducted a study about the NDCs and the integration of urban context into the NDC. Could you say something about that? And in how far do you see this as an instrument also where cities could contribute to help strengthening the urban resilience?
If you give me 2 minutes, I'll give you the exact date, time, venue of the launch of our latest research on that. But maybe just to say, we've published last year an analysis of, I think, 191 or so NDCs with those 200 indicators that I mentioned. But this year we provide much more information. We also have analyzed a number of countries in terms of the policy integration or the policy coherence, not just the NDCs, but also national climate change strategies, national urban policies, and how they are interlinked or not. So I think there's quite a bit of information there, and we'll launch that on Tuesday, I think. On Saturday this week.
okay, so we have only a few minutes left. And what I'd like to do is to ask each of our panelists to give us just a 30-second, a little bit more, we have 5 minutes left, answer to the question. I mean, it was interesting. You raised the issue of sponge cities, and I used to be the regional director in Asia Pacific, and China was doing some very interesting work in sponge cities. And they asked me, some of the city officials, how can we share this learning? Like we're really getting remarkable results, but we don't really have the means to share our learning with other cities. So the question I'd like each of you to reflect on is, what can we be doing that we're not doing yet to really enhance the learning between cities, the innovations that are coming out from your own experiences? How can we strengthen that? So maybe I would like to start with you, Adanya. Any reflections? Should we be doing something more than we're currently doing to strengthen learning between cities?
Thanks, Loretta. Excuse me. I think some of the innovations that I've seen are city-to-city and peer-to-peer learning exchanges, especially between, and forgive me for using the term, but global South and global North cities. And here, for example, I can mention the ICLEI Africa Afri-Food Links project, which uses certain European cities as hubs, which are then matched to less capacitated, less resource cities in Africa, and they work together on food issues and learn from each other directly. And it's a fantastic program that has only recently launched, and I'm very excited to see the outcomes. I also just want to mention, as a response to the previous question, if I may, that when reflecting on Bernard's remarks, that nature-based solutions are often one of the simplest and cheapest and best options for building resilience and adaptation. And one of the things that we've seen in our African coastal cities, for example, is that where people are restoring mangroves, they're not only working to prevent flood risk and sea level rise, they're also restoring fisheries that many local communities rely on. And I think there are simple solutions around education and knowledge empowerment from our indigenous people, from our most vulnerable populations, that we can learn from and extend and scale in other cities, regardless of where they are in the world.
And they don't have to cost a lot of money. So I think that's an important point. Let's just go straight down the line. Then thank you very much for that. And Bernard, over to you.
I've spoken a lot, but maybe can I just pitch that NDC meeting instead?
Okay.
So that is on the 8th of December, 3 o'clock. And it is in side event room 8 in the area B6.
Okay.
That's my 30 seconds.
And UN Habitat is doing a lot to help cities learn from each other.
Yes, and I think, I mean, there are probably, well, there's so many different dimensions to it. You've mentioned the North-South. Of course, there's a lot of interesting South-South learning experiences. But I think what is increasingly important to us is to look at developing national frameworks and national mechanisms of learning between cities. And it's been maybe a little bit frustrating in the past to see that depending on an initiative of a mayor, that city A in the same province does a fantastic job and city B in the same province doesn't. But with increasing frameworks, with climate action planning mandated, with investment frameworks in place that consider climate change, that need to learn from one another is increasing. And then, of course, that's an opportunity to connect the cities. It's an opportunity to not just put in policy frameworks, but also capacity frameworks in place. We have lots of interesting experience from the Philippines on that I could share, but there is really what happens is that the policy frameworks that are put in place come immediately with a capacity development process that really includes mandatory engagement at different levels of subnational government.
Okay, thank you very much. So,
Well, to be very practical, I would say that this is very empirical. Okay, it's a matter of experience. So let's find a way to maybe do once per year a state of play in which who has experience to share and who has the willingness of understanding, learning, or something to share at the same time would gather in a place and discuss this and exchange. If you want to do it in Venice, I don't know if there's Sendai, there are many other places, but if you want to do it in Venice, I mean, just let us know. And if I may just use another 20 seconds, because you're talking about, this is about knowledge, all right? And I would like to acknowledge my colleague, Pierpaolo Campostrini, who's the Director General of Corilla. Corilla is a consortium for gathering all the research that are done in Venice and to the extent of the Venice Lagoon. He's, first of all, the best person to liaise with when it comes to know what kind of experience what kind of, let's say, issue you would like to address, and to see whether Venice has been facing that and finding some kind of solutions. But at the same time, it's just because of his perseverance that Venice became the very last in time resilient hub. So thanks a lot.
Can I just congratulate you for that, please? It's really very gratifying because it's often the commitment or one or two people that makes such a difference. So thank you very much. Mayor, then next question, or the same question then to you.
Back to your question, I think it's no rocket science. Yeah, I think that cities shall get involved into networks. Yeah, like eCLAY, for example. But I'm also very optimistic that a movement like Making Cities Resilient 2030, it's becoming stronger and stronger, and more cities get involved. And there will be more pressure, for example, to find financial structures, to support poorer cities, for example. And one point I would like to add, I'm still a fan of peer-to-peer learning on a local level. Yeah, I just met Ernest Arce just 2 hours ago, the mayor of Cape Coast, and Cape Coast is our partner city since quite a few years. And every time we meet and every time a delegation visits the other city, we learn from each other. And I think this is very important because it's always both sides. Today we talked about waste management, and related to waste management, the city of Bonn learned quite a lot from Cape Coast, and Cape Coast learned a lot from Bonn. And so I think that kind of connection should be flourishing. Yeah.
Okay, so final words to Gino, and I know this is an issue that you're right at the forefront of. So please.
Thank you very much. I think I can only join what has been said already. There are so many opportunities, initiatives, platforms of exchange already. There is need for many more because we are many more people and many more leaders as we progress in time. My hope would really be that the CHAMP initiative that is now being endorsed by 64 countries, CHAMP essentially asked nations, parties here, to reach out and start to work with their local and regional governments on the issues of mitigation and adaptation resilience. And so I think, and that is where my hope lays. I hope that this brings a new dynamic for having structural dialogues and therefore also exchange on data, on things that we need to know at the local level to be enabled to take the right decisions. And I hope that this NDC process that is now in front of us and using CHAMP as a new mechanism domestically by national governments, that will push and help to foster even more the exchange, but in this sense here then domestically between national government and local governments, which I think is as essential as just across international pieces.
Completely agree. Okay, well, we have gone over our time. The organizers have been kind in letting us stay a few extra minutes. Thank you all to our panel. I really appreciate your insights, and thank you, and enjoy the rest of the COP. And we'll see you next year because urban issues are very strongly on the agenda now, and we'll continue our dialogue then. Thank you. Bye-bye.